Well, hello world. I guess we're not AI, so we shouldn't just say hello world.
That's
But
funny. Hello World is the first program anybody writes when they're learning C.
I know.
Did you know that?
I know. I
Not Fortran, C.
know. So, I want to just recognize for a second a very, very, very special thing wherever you're watching from, wherever you are, whether you're in Seattle or Washington or New York or Jakarta. I want you right now to look at your screen and yell, "Happy birthday, Mike Hamilton."
No, at this point, forgetting birthday, somebody has to remind me it's my birthday. Really, it's not something I want to recognize anymore.
Well, I think that if I just started singing "Happy Birthday" to you, everybody would turn off. So we're not going to do that. But in honor of Mike's birthday, I am as far from him as I ever get. I'm in Washington D.C. for the week. It's 100 degrees here, and so the good news is there are more degrees here than Mike has behind him. Um, So we have a couple of really important things to tell you. Number one, we have security awareness training coming up tomorrow on Friday. Next week, we're doing two webinars. Number one, for folks in the health sector, 5 common mistakes in the health sector,
I'll be
and
there.
and Mike will be there. And then we're also going to do a pen test demonstration, because one of the things that has happened in the last couple of years is all of these companies have started saying what they do are pen tests, and they're not. They're scans, they're like bots doing
Vulnerability
things, they're
assessments.
vulnerability assessments, they're not
Yeah.
pen tests. And so we're going to show you what a real pen test looks like, talk about what is a pen test, what's not a pen test, talk about smishing, talk about vishing, make up some new acronyms and cool words for things. But you can go to the events tab at the top of criticalinsight.com and sign up for those. Those are all the things coming up. So Mike, let's get to the cyber news here.
Cyber news.
Cyber news.
Over the last
Dun,
week.
dun, dun. If we had a music track, we would play it right now. It would probably be drums, right?
I can supply a music track. Just
That
to be clear.
What? Yeah, we all know. So one of the biggest things is this headline this week: cybercrime as a public health crisis. You wanna explain that one to folks?
Yeah, that was interesting. And when they're talking about cybercrime, so first of all, this is in the UK, the UK Consumers Association. So
Mm-hmm.
they did a survey, and they were talking more about fraud than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think it's surprising that their findings are being a scam victim is associated with lower life satisfaction, kind of more depression, lower levels of happiness. I mean, all of that stuff, right? Anxiety. Except, now I'm going to go off script here because the article did not say this, except the folks that get wrapped up in the advanced fee scams. They seem to be perfectly happy to be sending their money to the Nigerian prince. And I don't understand that. And it goes until it goes on so long that finally they come to their senses. And then I would imagine, yeah, it's pretty depressing after that when you have to admit to yourself that you were fooled all that time, all that money's gone forever.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And we've talked about this. One of the podcasts I listened to, talked about scam victims and how people never want to admit that they're scam victims.
Yeah.
And that is definitely
Well, it's interesting.
definitely a
In
problem.
our security awareness training, we talk about those cognitive biases that aid the scammers, right?
Mhm.
And they
Sure.
really do know this stuff. And there are things that, I mean, come to our security awareness training, we'll talk about this, right? But the whole anxiety inducing bait, the bait that comes from someone apparently of authority, there are these methods that are being used, and it's good to recognize these for what they are.
It is. It's very important.
Yeah.
Another, so, less cyber, but more on the privacy front. But, people are very interested in this legislation preventing data broker sales to government agencies.
Yeah. Okay. So we touched on this last week too, but when we start seeing, fairly routine reporting on this, it's looking like it's ramping up, right? So here's the deal. The apps on your phone, your car, your connected car. I mean, in just a myriad of ways, tracking data is collected about you, right? Your movements. And this gets aggregated and sold to these data brokers who will sell it to anyone, including law enforcement, who uses it to circumvent the warrant process. And that's specifically what they are trying to address. The fact that law enforcement uses this as an end run around search warrants. So, you know, I mean, I'm a little bit cynical about this, and I said this before. The reason Congress has taken this up is because Congress found out that Congress can be tracked. That's what got them to move on this. So,
Shocking.
regardless,
And I mean, and
good.
also shocking that you're cynical about something. I mean, nobody would have ever guessed.
When you've been in this business this long, you have no other choice than to be cynical.
I think it's a little bit like journalism in that way, Mike.
Probably.
By the way, speaking of your cynicism, you have renewed cynicism around, well, all social media, but LinkedIn.
As we're on LinkedIn right now. Yeah, where's the
We are
irony?
live on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And by the
Well,
way, even though Mike hates it, this is also live on Facebook. So I haven't figured out how to go live on Threads yet, but I will, even though Mike hates that.
If I had the proper tools, we'd put a stop to that, but I don't. It's the impersonation going on LinkedIn. People keep creating these profiles and say they're with our company. They are not. What's the purpose there? It's likely to reach out and gain trust with some of our customers, probably eventually, so that they can say, hey, we've changed our bank routing number. Here's the new place that you need to send the money, right? And I got to tell you, Jake, a whole lot of the stuff that I am getting on LinkedIn really looks like AI written marketing stuff with behind fake profiles, right? I mean, so setting aside, the whole impersonation thing, LinkedIn has become this kind of bot haven for trying to sell you stuff.
Well, it's look, as somebody who runs marketing, it is a delicate balance between
Yeah.
not wanting to create a wasteland of advertising on LinkedIn, and at the same time, that's where a lot of professionals are. That's where most people watch this, and finding that right balance and making sure that you're talking to customers and you're talking to people who might want to buy your product appropriately without it sounding like a bot. Is a hard thing to do, but a really important thing to do, and we can talk about that for a long, long, long time.
I know
But
you're
let's
really good
not.
at this, but this is why we do our marketing this way. We're not here to sell you stuff. We're here to tell you stuff. And if you eventually trust us, you'll call us when you need us.
Yeah, and I mean, as the head of marketing, maybe I want to sell you stuff too. I mean, I'll try. Okay. Hey, Tampa General Hospital. Really big news. Not good. They had a data breach that impacted 1.2 million patients. 1.2 million patient records.
Records, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this is normal news. We hear this every week, but I think it's the knock on that's coming that's going to be the worst part of this, right? So, what they lost was, the perfect combination of PII to engage in just all manner of fraud, right? So, the records are going to go up, they're going to get exposed if they don't pay the ransom, blah, 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 blah. If you combine that with what just happened to Norton Healthcare, right? So this was Norton got hit back on May 9th. That's when they first knew of, their data breach. And they still, well, as of last week, had not notified the victims. Okay. So now there's a class action suit, and it's about the fact that you didn't maintain reasonable controls and you failed to notify everybody. So here comes the class action, right? This delay violates HIPAA and other notification requirements. Tampa General needs to see this and make sure that they are talking appropriately to the victims here and exposing to the regulators and to the incident responders here what our controls look like, and they are consistent with the representations that we have made before, because if they're not, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, every breach at this point has a class action lawsuit that follows it, and then you have opposing counsel going through everything you've ever done to try to figure out if they can find a hole to make their class action lawsuit successful.
And the insurance companies are doing the same thing to find out if they have to cover you or not.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
Again, if you said something about your controls that turns out to not be true, they're not going to cover you. And then the class action is all yours.
Hey, one of the biggest stories that has happened in the last week, and I just don't think it has gotten all of the coverage that it needs to get, is the SEC rule, Securities Exchange Commission, saying that companies need to disclose a breach within 4 days.
Yep.
That's a big one, and I feel like it's gotten like a headline here, a headline there, but like that's a big one. That's a big change.
Yeah. Well, it's been lumpy, the process, because they got feedback. The feedback was not good. No, we don't want to do this. We don't know what to tell you within 4 days. We could make a mistake. We could disclose something that could exacerbate the whole problem. The interesting thing to me is that along with mandatory reporting, what they are really trying to get publicly traded companies to do is to make sure that they have security representation in their decision making, right? That means at the board level, the boards have to be briefed. You really need to do, quality risk management, identify risks, bubble those up through some kind of governance, have some of that land in the board meeting, which is what we do, right? I have to prepare a board presentation every quarter. And they want companies to do this, right? And so more than the mandatory reporting, it's about the representation that they want in publicly traded companies for cybersecurity. You got to read between those lines a little bit. It's not just about reporting.
And just, I know we have a lot of folks who watch this from critical infrastructure, whether that be hospitals or cities, counties. Does this impact them, or this is just public companies?
No, this is publicly traded companies. That's the only purview that the SEC has, but still the way that this cascades down to third-party risk management, is likely to impose not regulatory requirements, but standards of practice that are expected. And if you don't maintain them, you're not going to do business.
Sure. So, another big story is the cost of a breach has hit a record high. And, that's across industries, right?
It is across industries. Healthcare is still the costliest. And that's likely because there's regulators involved, right? HIPAA, you can be fined. And now these class actions come in behind it. And the FTC is aggressively enforcing the False Claims Act. So there's a triple whammy there if you're in healthcare. So I think that's a lot of the reason that healthcare is, the most expensive. But it's in general, it's the most expensive in the U.S. And I think it's right up around $10 million.
And healthcare entities pay ransoms because, patient lives are at risk. That is one of the reasons the bad guys continue to attack healthcare, is that, there are a number of healthcare entities that have paid a ransom. And I'm not judging them for doing it. I mean, they're trying to, you got somebody on a ventilator and you want to make sure the system, keeps working. But it is one of the reasons that the cost goes up, right?
Yeah. Yes, that is one of the reasons. And, when you brought up ventilators, and it just kind of jogged my mind. So the whole IoT seal of approval is coming out. And I think that's going to be especially beneficial to the healthcare sector.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Sure. By the way, anytime somebody says seal of approval, as somebody who lives in Washington State, I always picture an actual seal. So I want you to know that. Like,
I think you picture a sea lion, but please continue.
Bark. Okay. So, we touched on healthcare there, but, one of the other big headlines is the public sector. There's a new report. Public sector is slow to respond to cyber attacks.
Yeah. Is this surprising?
I mean,
it's with practitioners in such short supply, it is, unlikely that they're going to hit Lockheed levels of being able to respond quickly. And this is really about detecting in time too. And I think that's the bigger part of the problem. It's not their failure to respond quickly. It's that stuff goes on and they just don't know what's going on.
That's
So it's
right.
more about the monitoring and being able to integrate that with your response so that you can put out the grease fire on the stove before the house is engulfed in flames. You know, there are
Yeah, I mean,
numbers right today. There are a number of cities that are basically in flames because they're shut down. They can't operate.
well, and I mean, I want to add to that, the people who we know in the public sector, you were CISO of the city of Seattle, are great folks and, react quickly and do the right
Yeah.
things. They just don't have access to the same resources as the publicly traded companies we talked about a minute ago. And, so this is not to cast aspersions on them, instead to say, they need more resources to be able to do this, right?
Right. So, the research here comes from the Poneman Institute, right? And
Hmm.
I don't know if I ever tell you, Larry Poneman was the president of Gardent when Fred and I worked there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, interesting cat. But the public sector is still over 200 days to detect something has gone wrong, right? And then
That's
another
terrible.
73 days to get back on their feet. That's really a long time
It's a
when
long time.
you are managing the dispatch system for public safety and law
It's a
enforcement
long time.
and
Yeah.
water utilities and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it can get a lot worse than I think we've seen it get. But right now there's a couple of cities that are impacted with 911 and having to do hand dispatch.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw that in California and Texas, and
Hmm.
it's not good. And we talked about healthcare. Lives are on the line. Certainly true in public sector. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the national cybersecurity strategy
Hmm.
lumps them together under critical infrastructure and says, hey, we need to align everybody with NIST CSF.
Yep.
So
So yes, everybody please go out and do that. Align yourself with the standard of practice and be defensible in your controls, because when the stuff happens and it's this is a foreseeable event, you're going to have to respond quickly and you're going to have to show your controls, and you don't want this to go south on you because you didn't get after it.
Mhm, mhm.
Boy, that's a lot
So
of weird language.
So, speaking of threats to public sector, one of the things that you have said over the last 3, 4 years is a rise in hacktivism.
Hmm.
Folks who
You and I have been talking about that for a long
we've been
time.
talking about
Yep.
for a long time, right?
Hmm.
These are not folks who are in it for the money; they're in it because of a cause. And we now see that in headline. You predicted it, and it has happened to come true. And we've seen it just in the last week. And I think one of the new group is Siege Sec. Is that what it's called?
Sieged Sec. Yeah. So,
Siege.
this is a hacktivist collective,
Hmm.
and it's always fuzzy who really is a hacktivist, who's a criminal, who is a state sponsored actor. And so this is what they just did. They hit NATO, all right, and grabbed records, and they say that the reason they did this is the alleged infringement of human rights by NATO. So that doesn't sound like a reason to me that really holds water. I cannot think of NATO as a collective, infringing on human rights. So that kind of begs the question, is this really a hacktivist group? But the other one, Killnet,
Hmm.
apparently this Killnet, right? So these have been script kiddies that do, colloquially, script kiddies that do website defacements and things like that. They are starting to get volunteers coming in that have greater skill sets, and we predicted this as the war does not go well for Russia. The patriotism
That's right.
there and the level of skills that they have are going to converge, and this is starting to happen. So now all these warnings are coming out of CISA about threats to critical infrastructure. We poo-pooed these guys. Got to keep an eye on them.
For
Hmm.
sure, for sure. All right, Mike. Threats and vulns. What do you got?
Yo, so the big ones.
Yo, that's how we're
Yeah,
beginning threats and vulns.
it is.
Okay.
Microtik routers. So apparently, you can search this stuff with Shodan, and there's about 900,000 of them that are vulnerable to complete takeover And that lets
That's
them surveil
fantastic.
traffic. That lets, get your credentials when you log into your bank, stuff like that. Ivanti, there's 35078 is the CVE. It has a CVSS of 10. If you use Ivanti products, it's called the EPMM, 0-day vulnerability, under active exploit right now. Apple, did you see all the stuff that came out with Apple? So I updated yesterday to 16.6. Everybody needs to update that, and it's Mac OS 2, because there is a zero-click spyware campaign. The CVE is 38606. The Zyxel, which are basically consumer grade products. There's a DDoS botnet that's operating from your home router. Now, I went and looked, and my home router, and I'm not going to tell you who the service provider is a Zyxel modem.
Oh,
And so the patches have been released. I think it's incumbent on us as consumers to contact our service providers if you use those Zyxel modems and say, did you patch this? This is important. What's another one? The big one that came out about critical infrastructure, they call it Tetra Burst. So this is a radio communication system used largely for remote telemetry, right? So like if I'm a water utility, I need to know the level of water in wells and that storage tank and stuff like that. So these are radio communications that send these back, and it's automatically ingested into a control system that knows how to open valves and stuff. Well, these are especially vulnerable. This is bad. And, we're talking about power grid, gas pipelines, railways, and our adversaries read these too. And the trend that we've seen is when a vulnerability is announced, the reverse engineering of the patch happens right away, and then the campaign goes on right away. So critical infrastructure, this is something you're going to get after immediately. I am hoping Tetra it's in more than 100 countries. This could end up being like super, super bad.
Yeah, no, that's not good. And all of this is bad. Mike, every one of these, I feel like you always say patch Chrome. And today you didn't say patch Chrome.
Patch Chrome.
Oh, do you need a patch Chrome?
Patch Chrome.
Also, I encourage everybody, when you're in a meeting with somebody and they share their screen and it says update on the top of Chrome, you should be
stop the meeting.
You should be the person who says, hey, you need to patch Chrome.
Yeah.
It's it's like correcting somebody's grammar. It's a very nice thing to do. All right, Mike, at the end of all these, you always have a kicker, the thing at the end to make people think, smile, whatever. What do you got?
All right, this is a short one, but I thought this was funny. I mean, it's not funny from the perspective of a taxpayer to see taxpayer money spent this way, but apparently there was a convicted fraudster who came up with an invention that said would extend electric vehicle range by 75%. And the government bought it. And they gave this dude $680,000 to attach this thing to the federal government's EV fleet to see how this worked, right? And of course it didn't work. So this guy's name is Lawrence Harge. Previously, he had invented a fire extinguisher that doesn't work, and I'm not making this up, a party plate with a beer holder in the middle. Okay. And he claimed that this black box would regenerate itself, right? That this was regenerative for battery storage, which it's if you had gone to one physicist and said, is this going to work? No, there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. And that's essentially what he was trying to sell. Way to go, government procurement.
So wait, so I read this one. This actually happened here in Washington, D.C., where I am, and it was the D.C. government.
Yeah, it was the federal government, yes.
Yeah, no, it was the D.C. government. I don't think it was federal.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, I think it was the D.C. government that did this. And now, since
that makes it worse.
Since I have a week here in D.C., I think I know a way to go make $500,000.
Yeah, sure. Start making promises, man.
You know what? That's what we do in marketing. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Remember, everybody right now, send Mike Hamilton an email,
Don't do that.
mike.hamilton@criticalinsight.com, and say happy birthday. Send him a picture of a cake. Don't send malware. Have a
Or
great week.
we'll figure it out.
Bye, everybody.